Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast. Joining me today is Dr. Sarah Gascon. Sarah and I are going to be diving into her career as a handball athlete, the impact that handball has had on her successes throughout life, and so much more. And we also talk about a lot of different coaching philosophies and strategies to implement when working with athletes, as Sarah is both an athlete and someone who has studied movement science, biomechanics, and so on at an incredibly high level. She's a very smart person, very athletic person, and she's done so many things across her life. And I really enjoyed chatting with her, and I know that you're going to learn a lot of great things from her. Episodes like this are made possible by ISOFIT. ISOFIT is our go-to for all things isometric strength training and the official sponsor of Season 5 of the podcast. For more on ISOFIT, you can check the description below. Enjoy. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
No, I appreciate it, Dan. Thanks for the invite.
For people who may not be familiar with you and all the incredible things that you're doing from, as you just mentioned, a podcast on your own, in addition to the handball team, the silver medal that you all just won, fill them in about all the amazing things that you do day in and day out, Sarah.
Yeah, sure. So I have been a proud member of Team USA for 21 years now. I played for USA Baseball, USA Volleyball, and USA Team Handball. I've been playing USA Team Handball the longest, about 20 years of the 21, and it has taken me all over the country and all over the world. During my tenure, I was able to earn my master's of science, my MBA, and my PhD in kinesiology. I currently live in Auburn, Alabama. I've been here for about 10 years. I moved here back in January of 2014 to train full-time with the USA Women's National Handball Team. And I just decided to stay, and it's been a really great experience. Recently, I was just hired to be a team leader and head of delegation for the USA Wheelchair Handball National Team, which is our inaugural team. We've never had a team before, and I just returned from Egypt, so I'm excited to talk about a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's incredible. I mean, few different things there. I think you put the whole concept of early sports specialization to death there,
Yeah.
being a volleyball, baseball, and handball athlete all at an
Yeah.
extremely high level. That's so impressive. And then on top of that, earning 3 different degrees during that time as well. I
Yeah.
don't know when you had time to like sleep or recover or anything, but it's really impressive what you've been able to do. How did you find your way into this world of handball? Because, as we were talking with Matt earlier this week, I feel like it's not something that people are really exposed to significantly in the States that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So during my college career, I played volleyball, softball, and soccer at a Division I school, Southeastern Louisiana University. And during my junior year of volleyball, I went to USA Volleyball tryouts. And the tryouts were basically down the street. They were in New Orleans. I was in Hammond, Louisiana, and that's about 45 minutes away. And I went to volleyball tryouts. I actually did really well at tryouts, but at the end of the tryouts, there was a representative from USA Team Handball that said, "Hey, if you don't make the Olympic team for Athens, which was 2004, then you should come and try handball." And so I was like, "Handball? What is handball?" So my dad was with me, and I was like, "Dad, before we leave, let's go check out this video of handball." So we went to watch this video of handball, and we both looked at each other. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the most amazing sport ever. I have to play this sport." And I got the contact information from the representative, and I emailed her and the head coach at the time. They didn't respond to me. And a few months later, I was in softball season. I received an email from USA Volleyball stating that I made one of their teams and that I would be headed to the Czech Republic that summer to play for USA Volleyball. So I was, of course, really excited about that because that's step one into making the Olympic team for 2004. So participated in USA Volleyball training camp, and we also played in some scrimmages in the Czech Republic. Came home to finish out my senior year, and then again, during softball season, I receive an email, but this time it's from USA Baseball. and they were starting their inaugural women's baseball team. And of course, I was like, obviously, I have to try out for that too. And so I tried out for that team, made the team, went to world championships that summer. We won a gold medal. We won world championships that year and went to finish my fifth year at Southeastern. And the soccer coach said, "Hey, come and play soccer. You're a good athlete." So I went to play soccer for my final semester. So when I graduated from Southeastern, I moved home for a little bit. I contacted USA Team Handball again, and this time they responded to me because I didn't make the Olympic team for volleyball. So I didn't want to retire from volleyball, but I wasn't really sure my next steps. So once I emailed USA Team Handball, the head coach responded and said, "Yeah, come to tryouts. They're in Cortland, New York. This is where we reside right now." So I jumped on a plane, went to Cortland, New York. It was a week-long tryout. I was thinking I could play this sport. It has all these elements of the sports that I already played, blocking in volleyball, dribbling like basketball, throwing like baseball and softball, playing defense like basketball. So it had all these different elements of all the sports that I played. And so I thought that I could make the team. So I went to tryouts and it was like the hardest tryouts I've ever been to because it was so physically demanding. It's basically a full contact sport. You can't tackle, but there's a lot of hitting, a lot of contact. And of course, like I stated, all the elements of the sports that I've played. And of course, we had to run a beep test and they had to do all this testing for us, and I was terrible at it. But I knew by day two that I was going to make the team because I had the right skill set for the sport. It's just I needed to learn the sport. So by the end of the week, the coach congratulated me, invited me to move to New York, to Cortland, New York, and train there full time. And I ended up doing that in 2005 and then still also played for USA Baseball during that time. So I was playing both handball and baseball for about 5 more years at that point, and then yeah, just stayed with handball. I shifted out of baseball after my last World Championships in 2010 and redirected my focus on handball. My goal has always been to be an Olympic athlete and play at the highest level possible. And handball has allowed me to participate in a lot of different international events and play professionally overseas. And then I've been able to earn my education along the way.
Yeah, no, that's an absolutely incredible backstory. And I love how it's one of those things where it seems like all the pieces just kind of came together perfectly for you, for lack of a better way to put it. It was not necessarily this plan of, oh, we're going to, join the handball team. It was
Yeah.
just kind of like things fell into place and
Yeah.
here you are now. And I think that there's something really powerful about that, kind of going on these journeys that we don't necessarily expect we're going to go on, but they often lead us to amazing places that way, from sport development to the educational piece and so on that way. And ultimately it sounds like handball, from what you said, enabled you to do those things that you wanted to do. You were able to go out and compete at the highest level of sport. You're able to compete across the world, and now you get some cool hardware to show off because of it as well too. So I think it's really awesome how a sport like handball opens up doors that might not have presented themselves to athletes otherwise.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I knew at a very young age that I wanted to play for Team USA and I wanted to be an Olympian. And so because I had that vision and those dreams and that was my purpose as a child growing up, I just stayed focused on those things. And then, like you said, it opened up a lot of opportunities for me. And a lot of people, and you brought up sports specialization. I think during my period of time in high school, that's when sports specializations really started occurring, and I saw it a lot more. And in fact, I had a lot of pressure from my coaches in high school saying, "Well, you're not going to play more than one sport in college." And I was like, of course I am. Like, of course I can play more than one sport. I played more than one sport my whole life at that point. So of course I'm going to play more than one sport in college. And so because of that, because I said, yes, I will, and then I did it, it allowed me to play more than one sport, not just at a Division I level, but like you said, at the highest level possible that at that time a woman could play in.
Yeah, no. And I think that there's something too to be said about the opportunities that come from handball and some of these other different sports too, right? Like I work with a girl on the bobsled team as well, and the opportunities that they have opened up for female athletes in general
Mhm.
to have an opportunity to continue to compete and continue to play high level sport after, quote unquote, traditional sport or main sport, is something that I think has a ton of value. And on that note as well, I feel like the sports side of things can really teach you a lot about life and really set you up for success in a lot of different ways. Like in your specific instance, I can't help but wonder if you would have gotten those three additional degrees and become the person you are now if it wasn't for the role that handball and some of these other sports played along the way. So I think there's a element to overall quality of life that engaging in high level sport and competitive activity provides that is really difficult to find that way. And obviously, it gives you such a unique lens to look through in that you ended up studying a lot in the way of kinesiology and biomechanics and movement science. And then you are a high level athlete yourself. So it's
Mhm.
almost like you can kind of look at your studies as a reflection of how you look at yourself, I guess, in a way.
Oh, absolutely. And it helps me to kind of reframe my thinking. And I have to be careful about it because I view the world now as a sports scientist. And I know with sports or me as an athlete, sometimes that gets in the way of performance because you get fixated so much on the numbers or, like you said, the biomechanics of things. And I think a lot of the times it's okay as an athlete to keep things simple. I have a strength and conditioning coach. Even though I could program myself, but my strength and conditioning coach was my strength and conditioning coach from a few years ago that I'm friends with, and we went to school together, earned our PhDs together, Dr. Cody Hahn, who's brilliant. And so anyway, I was like, I need this guy back on my team. I need him to program for me because I need to take that part out of my responsibilities. Same thing with the nutritionist, or I have a ton of athletic trainer friends or physical therapist friends, and those people that are on my team, they have helped me during my career, and they've helped me still play into my 40s, which is totally unheard of for female athletes. But I give all of my credit to them keeping me healthy and engaged and really helping me to focus on the things that I need to do, taking that sports science away from me and allowing me just to perform on the court.
You see, that's something that I wish, going back to your point a second ago on sports specialization and how that was starting to become a thing as you were growing up. I think that that concept of having a team-based approach to your overall management as an athlete and your overall development as an athlete needs to be caught on a little bit earlier. And I think that consistency speaks volumes in this world as well, in the sense that I see a lot of younger athletes who jump from one coach to the next, to the next, to the next, every year, every other year, or, a new sports performance facility opens up in town and they've got shiny new toys. So every athlete
Yeah.
leaves and goes there. And then 2 years later, another new one opens up and everyone leaves and goes there. And I think that there's a certain element of sport and life that, just performance longevity, for lack of a better way to put it, is ultimately one of the key goals, right? Like it's not enough to just play at a high level. You want to play at a high level for years and years and years and not have to worry about injury, or if you do get hurt, not have to worry about coming back. You just want all your boxes checked and you want to know you're around great people who have your best interest in mind and that have gotten to know you over a long period of time. And I think that developing that kind of team-based approach or collaborative care to performance approach with PT, AT, strength and conditioning, and all those other different disciplines that you mentioned that way should be a new priority for kind of the younger next generation of athlete, if you want to call it that, as they kind of go about their athletic journey. Because I think that you can do a ton on your own, but it's a lot easier to go places and do things when you've got the right team of people around you.
Yeah, for sure. And it takes, like you said, it takes consistency, it takes trust on both ends, from a physical therapist or athletic trainer or strength and conditioning side to my side as well. And the thing that I do with my team that I work with is we communicate. So we're talking every couple of weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, just touching base. We're talking about new research, we're talking about how to apply it, but I think my team would agree. At the end of the day, we're all in agreement that the fundamentals and the new science that's coming out, or the things that are coming out, they may be shiny and new and flashy and exciting, but at the end of the day, it's hard work, and it's hard work doing the fundamentals. It's like what I say about Major League Baseball players. There's a reason why in the off season they're fielding thousands of ground balls. It's nothing shiny, it's nothing new, it's pretty boring, redundant, but they have to prepare their body and their mind for the season. You look at Tom Brady, he would do the same thing. He'd be working on his footwork and working on his throwing in the off season, and he's doing fundamental work that's simple and boring and redundant, but that's what makes the great players great, because they could do those things consistently over a long period of time.
Yeah, I think that's such a key takeaway. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, Sarah, because it's one of those things that I like to say a lot, but it doesn't carry the same weight when I say it because I'm not an Olympic level athlete. For some reason, it just never clicked for me. But there is so much value in doing simple things
Yeah,
ridiculously well and never settling for good enough with those simple things. And I think too often people feel like they've advanced past or graduated past certain things that they've done thousands and thousands of times. And then we, for some reason get surprised when those simple things are the reason for injury.
yeah,
So I think that there's so much value in never being content with where you're at in the simple things and understanding that if you do the simple things ridiculously well a majority of the time, you're going to be better than the majority of the athletes
yeah,
out there. There's a ton of value in simplicity, like you said. And I think that the same goes true in the sense that we as coaches need to be mindful of how we approach our athletes with what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. Any athlete that I work with from a PT sense, I want them to know why we're doing exercises and what kind of the intent is and how it relates back to their main thing, why they're here in the first place.
yeah,
But by the same token, I don't need to give them an hour-long explanation of why we're doing one exercise over another, or why I think it's better for them, or why I chose the weight I did or the
yeah,
tempo I did, because the majority of them don't care. I think that
right.
from a coaching eye standpoint, it's really important for us to give insight and, as you mentioned before, build that trust with the athlete that we work with. But by the same token, we have to understand where to draw our lines and kind
Yeah,
of where to stay in between in the sense of educating the athlete, building trust, but also not going off the deep end with that.
yeah, yeah. When I met Dr. Han Cody, when I met him the first time, I would ask a ton of questions, and it wasn't me challenging his authority as a strength and conditioning coach. It was me being very curious and wanting to know, okay, what's the game plan here? I want to know and understand, because it's my body that has to evolve and change and perform. And I want to be on the same page as you. And so it's really funny to see our relationship kind of evolve. And when anybody came in to our space and our circle, whether it be interns or other strength and conditioning coaches, he always had to preface by saying, I'm just going to warn you about Sarah. She's going to ask you a lot of questions. Just answer them as best you can. And if you need help, I'm here to help you. But, it's I've always been a part of a team. Being a part of a team is super important to me, especially my team of coaches that I work with or trainers that I work with, a strength and conditioning coach or PTs or ATs. I have to trust them just like they have to trust me, just like I have to do the fundamental things for them, whether it's accessory work, working with a TheraBand, or, body weight exercises that seem so boring to me, or doing extra mobility work that's so boring. But at the end of the day, they have my best interests in mind, and they want me to perform at an elite level. Not only because it's good for them, but it's also just good in general for our team. And they really care about my overall health and well-being. So, I try to take advantage of the brilliant brains that I'm around. I feel very fortunate, because I've been able to have a very long, I mean, it's crazy to think about. I've had a super long career. I've been playing sports since I was 4. And, I've had a few injuries here and there, but I've been able to really bounce back from them because I trusted, my ATs and PTs and my strength and conditioning coaches.
Yeah, and I think that there's so many great discussion points based on what you just said. I mean, first off, I think it's really good and really healthy for athletes to have questions for their coaches,
Mhm.
or on the flip side, for coaches and PTs to actually flip the script a little bit and have the conversation with their athlete about what the athlete wants to do and what they want to accomplish, and how they want to go about it. Because, I'll take an example. I rehab a lot of, girls after ACL injury, and not all of them like some of the different quad loading exercises that I do. Like, I've yet to find someone who likes Bulgarian split squats. It just doesn't exist.
Oh,
Um,
I like
so
them.
so
Maybe I'm
so
weird.
so you're the first one. Congratulations. But sometimes I'll give them the choice. I'll say, hey, look, I've got 20 different options we can use to load your quad today. What do you want to start with? And
Yeah.
I think that there's something about shifting the locus of control back to the athlete, but you have to understand when the athlete wants that, because some athletes just want to be told what to do. They think
Yeah.
about things the rest of their day. They just want to go in, train, and get out. And other athletes, they like having that sense of control. So understanding when to give your athlete control versus not to give them control, I think is important. And then on top of that as well, you mentioned about trusting in the team that you have and they've been able to produce results, ensuring that you have the right team around you. And you mentioning before that you ask a lot of questions to Dr. Hahn and different individuals that way. I think that your answer of if you have the right team around you will come from those questions, not necessarily their ability to answer them, but their
Mhm.
willingness to sit there with you through all the questions and sort through everything and make you feel comfortable and confident with what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how it's going to help you. Because at the end of the day, I think we all, as coaches and rehab professionals and that sort of thing, like to disagree on the nuances within the science and the
Yep.
literature. But if you can tell by the way someone answers it that their intention is to truly do right by you, then you're in the right spot. It doesn't necessarily, obviously, what they know is important, but by the same token, having someone who's willing to, go against the grain, think outside the box, or just rethink everything that they've ever thought specifically for you and your care, I think is very, very valuable and very hard to find.
Yeah. It's also interesting the state that I'm in right now. I'm 42 years old. There's no literature on me or female athletes like me. So we're crossing into some territory that is unknown. And so now how do you train an elite athlete, female athlete that's 42 years old? There's like no science on it, right? There's no data on it. So when as you were speaking, I was thinking, yeah, it's the trust, but it's also really being honest. It's me holding myself accountable and holding my team accountable and them holding me accountable as well. So not every day is perfect for me. I struggle a lot. My body breaks down a little bit more or needs a little bit more recovery. And that's something that I have to communicate with my team because sometimes I'm not in it to win it. It's just, one of the things I'm not in it to win it. And we try to monitor a lot of what goes on with me, whether it's hydration, my nutrition levels, making sure my macros are correct. So there's like this whole process behind it as well. But what I say to people, athletes, if you want to be the 1% of the 1%, you have to go above and beyond and do the things that the rest of the population doesn't do, which is kind of micromanage yourself with all these different elements of which help you perform at an elite level. And I would probably be like this anyway if I wasn't an elite athlete because you're still a performer at the end of the day. And I think it's important to monitor these habits to help you in your everyday life.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And as you were talking, it made me think back to a conversation we had on the podcast recently with a guy named Rob Wilson, where he discusses his concept, which he calls the check engine light, in the sense that,
Mhm.
every body has these little warning signs that we get day in and day out. Every athlete gets them as far as, hey, check this or look into that. The majority of the time we ignored them, when in reality we should be teaching our athletes what these different signs mean
Yeah.
and what to do about them. So you mentioned about how you dial in everything, including hydration status and macros. And, to a lot of people like myself, like I've never worried about that, but I've also never really competed at that high of a level of sport.
Yeah.
I've just kind of, I want to stay looking good and feeling good. And I
Yeah.
found I don't need to track everything in order to do that. But when you're talking about the highest level of competition, it's 1% differences that make or break the difference between winning and losing, right? You mentioned you played volleyball. It's jumping an inch higher than the other
Yes.
opponent that makes the difference between winning and losing that game. So how do you get that 1 inch? Well, you have to look at all the specific little minute details that go into it, and you have to address all of them holistically. And I think that the more attention to detail you give to that, the better your performance is going to be, the less likely you are to get injured based on your experience, obviously. But there's something to be said about being willing to do that because it's boring. It's not
Yeah.
the sexy, cool Instagram stuff that you see all the time. It's like,
Mhm.
wait, I have to count macros, really?
Yeah.
But that's one of the pieces that I see coming up over and over again that underlies this elite level of performance is being willing to sweat the small stuff like you do.
Yeah. And again, there's a ton of research that's coming out about performance, sport performance. There was a um, article that came out, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 years ago about basketball free throw shooters, just college kids shooting free throws. They had 7 hours of sleep, but when they increased their sleep to 8 or 9 hours of sleep, they had a higher percentage of free throws that were made, right? So the little things like that makes a huge difference. And like you said, it could be, 0.001% of that 1% that makes you a little bit better. But any edge as an athlete that you just try to find it. And it's not a one size fits all type of formula. But like you said, like we've said, it is boring, it's redundant, and you know, it's the little things that really make a huge difference, especially in the longevity of your career.
How do you feel the younger athlete who might be listening to this episode might kind of like buy into this concept of doing the simple things and doing the boring things really, really well over and over again to get that long-term success and long-term result? Because let's face it, some of these different things like stretching or TheraBand exercises or
Yeah.
counting macros, they get a little boring sometimes. And I know, at least for myself, when I was 19, 20 years old, there was no way you were going to convince me to do these things because
Yeah.
I knew what was best because I'm 19 or 20, right? You just know everything at that age. So how do you go about, what's kind of the message to younger athletes who are, kind of starting to dabble around this performance side of things that, are being told these things, but maybe aren't doing them yet?
Yeah, I think it's difficult because the athletes, the younger generation, they have your TikTok, your Instagram, all your social media platforms, and there's a lot of flashy things on social media. So one, it looks attractive and it looks like something that's fun, but it also, to me, it doesn't always work, right? There's a reason why we do fundamental work because science, our literature has proven it. Strength and conditioning coaches still do it, so do athletic trainers and physical therapists. Now, you can improvise a little bit or deviate a little bit, but at the end of the day, the fundamentals are the fundamentals. And I think athletes are still doing a variation of a squat. They're still doing things like that are may seem boring and they're not the super flashy Olympic lifting or balancing on a physio ball and pressing a barbell over your head, but they're safe, they're effective, and elite athletes are still doing them at the end of the day. So I think it's difficult for this generation of athletes coming up because they're surrounded by the social media aspect, but they're also surrounded by some coaches that don't necessarily have the education or background, but they look good on Instagram, and then they have their own facility, and then they're doing some flashy things at their facility. But you got to be careful with that because at the end of the day, your body will break down a lot sooner if it doesn't have a foundation to work off of. And the foundation that you work off of as an athlete are the fundamentals of lifting, both from an accessory standpoint and a heavy lifting standpoint. So you have to go through the grind and go through that process, and periodization works.
Probably 100 years, if not more, anyways, as being a main staple in the training program. And I think that concept of periodization and the concept of training through that kind of long-term athlete development lens is so important because I know everyone wants everything immediately. And you mentioned about the social media side of things and really just how we live in this world of instant gratification. And unfortunately, performance is anything but that. There's no immediate, one thing that you can do to magically like triple your performance in a week that I've found yet. Maybe it exists, but I
Yeah.
don't know what it is. So understanding that training is really a long-term game and training is really a long-term grind, and understanding that, it's going to teach you so much along the way. And if you embrace the grind that comes with that, you're going to become a better person and a better athlete for it. And also knowing that, as you mentioned, there are the cool, flashy things out there, but they're not likely to move the needle forward. I forget what the principle is called, but essentially it states that 80% of the results you get are going to come from 20% of the work you do.
Yeah.
So the formula is all about finding what that 20% is and then putting all of our stock into that. And very rarely have I seen it be, the really cool, flashy things. The majority of the time, again, it's the simple things done ridiculously well. And that's how I train. And that's why I train the way I train as well. To flip kind of the conversation on the social media influence for a second, the one thing I have seen is this has actually become a great tool for some of the athletes we work with to get more excited and motivated and bought into training. Actually, is training is very trendy now. So they'll
Yeah.
put their training clips online, or they'll hit a TikTok dance in between their sets or something, which like go off, go for it. That's not anything that you're going to see me doing anytime soon. But I think that there's a certain element of fun that gets added into training because of social media. And I think that it's a way that athletes who historically maybe don't enjoy training the most can actually kind of start to fall in love with this process of self-improvement and self-betterment physically that way.
Yeah, and I also think, credit to some of the sports scientists that are out there publishing their information and providing tips or videos and explaining certain things about the body, how it moves, and what certain exercises will do for you and how it'll help you improve your performance, whether it's on the field or at bat or whatever it may be, you name it. But I think the positive thing, like you stated, is that there's an educational aspect of social media that athletes are seeing now. And at the end of the day, you want to make the weight room fun, you want to make conditioning competitive, you want to do those things that the athletes get excited about. And it's not, I know I love winning, but I hate losing more than I love winning. So, like that other aspect of what it means to be a part of a team and enjoying the process. And then you get to reap the benefits as an athlete when you perform, whether you win or lose. And, I always loved that growing up as an athlete, having that competitive spirit. But then I also loved it when I started coaching and I started teaching some of the younger girls about what it means to be a competitor and, doing your best or just enjoying certain things that are very difficult, whether it's in the weight room or on the court. But just finding some joy in it. And the other thing is, at the end of the day, you don't get to do this forever. You don't get to do this the rest of your life. You get to do it for a very, very short period of time. And some young athletes only get to do it until high school, and others are fortunate enough to do it in college. But then after college at 22, then they're done. It's just a small percentage get to go move on to be professional athletes or play for their country. And so, what I would recommend is just take advantage of it now and enjoy the moments and enjoy the tough moments and the most difficult and physically demanding moments, but also, kudos to a lot of people that are making it fun, both the coaches and sports scientists and athletic trainers, physical therapists, etc. I think that goes a long way for these athletes now. So I definitely encourage it. I like seeing that as well as an older athlete and as a coach as well. It's super fun. And I don't know how it would be if I were them. I don't know if I would be that person because I was so serious as a kid. But I'm glad that they are finding more joy in playing sports and participating in sports, especially female athletes.
Yeah, no, I completely echo that point, Sarah. I'm curious, what's next on the horizon for you? We just got back from Egypt, playing international handball that way. Is there more handball competitions in the future, or what do the next several years hold for you?
Yeah, for sure. I was fortunate enough. I was selected to be a part of the coaching staff for our first ever, our inaugural wheelchair handball national team. Dr. Ford Dyke, who I am friends with, I went to school with him at Auburn. He was in psychophysiology. He was asked to be the head coach of the wheelchair team. He has experience with wheelchair basketball. He's a high performance coach for the Auburn wheelchair basketball team. He coaches with Coach Rob Taylor, who just won another gold medal with USA wheelchair basketball, which is incredible. Um, so Ford and myself, Rita Clanton, who's a 1984 Olympic handball athlete who has been involved with USA Team Handball for 40 years. Lisa Egan, who's a 96 Olympic handball athlete, and Eric Finch, who was a men's national team player. He was a goalie. Ford and Eric met here at Auburn. They both played on the men's national team when we were training here full time. And I met Ford and Eric here while I was training with the women's national team. So we are actually all friends, and Ford kind of put this staff together, and then started recruiting athletes like crazy. So we have adaptive athletes from wheelchair basketball, wheelchair football, tennis, you name it, athletes from all over the country. And it has been a grind. Talk about a sprint. We received the wild card bid in May from the International Handball Federation to participate in world championships for wheelchair handball, which was to be played in Cairo, Egypt. And from May until 3 weeks ago, we have been grinding, trying to find donors and sponsors, trying to hold practices, training camps, and then, of course, making a final selection for the team. So we've had our hands busy with all the logistical aspects of putting a team together. We had Ford, he says we had basically just a blank canvas and we were able to just paint this picture the way that we wanted to paint it. And our team consisted of 10 athletes. We had 7 males and 3 females, varying degrees of abilities. And it was an interesting process for us because adaptive athletes go through this classification process of the ability to move and how they operate in a chair and their range of motion and their injury. And so that was an interesting learning process for me. Anyway, we compiled our group of athletes and headed off to Cairo and played in our first ever world championships. And it was the first time ever in the history of USA Team Handball Federation that we were able to play for a medal. And it wasn't any medal, it was the gold medal. We ended up losing to Egypt, unfortunately, but I have never been so happy and so proud of representing my country and being with a group of athletes than I had with this wheelchair national team. Every morning you'd wake up and you were just so happy to see them and excited to see them, and they were so happy. And it was just the most incredible journey I've ever been on with a group of athletes and my friends on the staff. And I really can't say enough of them as people, but also what they were able to accomplish in such a short period of time. And we weren't supposed to win. We were the wild card. We were supposed to come in last and lose every game. And then we find ourselves in the gold medal game. And it was, the credit is not to the staff, it's to the athletes. And everybody on the staff would probably tell you the same thing. These athletes came in, they learned a brand new sport, they have exceptional chair skills, athletic ability, and they just did their best to perform at that elite level. They were very engaged at practice, at video sessions. They asked a lot of questions, but they were the ones that were really the engine running the operation. They would watch extra film or they would hang out with each other, which I think is super valuable off the court when you could spend time with each other and you're playing cards or laughing or cutting up, like all of those things make a huge difference when you play on the court together. So, hats off to those athletes because it was an incredible journey. They were so mad after they lost the gold medal, but I was just trying to tell them, you have no idea how long this has taken for us to even compete at this level and win a medal at world championships. We have never done that in the history of handball. So, you could be mad right now, but I am so happy.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. And I certainly think it speaks volumes to understanding that, in life, it's never what has happened to you, it's what you choose to become. And ultimately, I think anyone, regardless of their situation or circumstances, can find a way, if surrounded by the right people, to engage in some element of fitness and performance and sports competition, whatever that might look like. I think that there's a way to make it happen. So I think that ultimately, the more we all collectively work to make that opportunity possible for athletes of any stage, any level, or any, for lack of a better way to put it, ability and appearance, the better we are all collectively in the sports space going to be. And it's certainly one of those things that I find is very, very motivating to me as well, as we kind of all work together to lift each other up that way.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, I absolutely love the work that you're doing in the space of handball and high level sport that way. For people who are interested in finding out more about you and keeping up to date with all the amazing things that they do, where can they find you at online?
Yeah, I have I'm pretty busy on LinkedIn, so I like to use LinkedIn. I also have an Instagram and a Twitter, or I should say X now, and Facebook. I am not as big on those social media channels, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I also feel free to email me if you'd like. My email address is sgascon4@gmail.com. So I'm happy to answer any questions or, if you have any comments about anything, happy to just touch base with you through email as well. But I think the best is probably LinkedIn for me. And it's just my name, Sarah Gascon, on LinkedIn. And yeah, I'm just really excited for the future of not only handball, but the athletes that I'm working with. And as I finish up my career, I'm really excited and looking forward to the future and really trying to grow and develop wheelchair handball in the country and help it grow in the world. But we're always looking for athletes. We're also always looking for sponsors and donors as well. Our athletes aren't paid, our staff is not paid, it's totally volunteer. And what we try to do is work extremely hard so our athletes don't have to pay anything for training camp or even participating in these tournaments. So, any little bit helps. And if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you're more than welcome to contact me or even check us out online at usateamhandball.org.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely incredible work that you all are doing there with the adaptive athlete population in handball, Sarah. And obviously, we referenced this when we were talking with Matt too, but there's so many resources online to just help grow the game of handball because, as we've discussed, it's an incredible sport that can open up a whole lot of opportunities for people. So we'll link to all of that in the description below. That way, if you didn't quite catch those things, you can just click there. Sarah, I really appreciate your time and all the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Dan. It was a pleasure and honor, and go Team USA.